Okay, so we've looked at the big picture, the macro point of view of a story from the editor's point of view. We understand that the book is working. The book moves from beginning to middle to end, and it seems to be, hitting all the marks. It's hitting its conventions and obligatory scenes. Is there a way we can make a book that works incredible? Can we take it to the next level? Or a book that doesn't work and make it work, and even maybe a little bit better than that? And the answer to that is, of course. So how do you do that? Well, the way you do that is looking at the micro point of view. And the way you do this requires a lot of blue-collar effort and a lot of hard work, but if you've already written a manuscript, you're very familiar with that anyway. So to start, here's what I do. I've got my global foolscap story grid written down on a piece of paper. I see the story's doing okay. The body's okay. Now, there's going to be some problems within the body of that story. So I'll take the 400-page manuscript, and the first thing that I'll do is I'll give myself a stapler, and then I will peel off 2 or 3 pages, or however many pages it takes to make one scene. And I'll move to the next scene, and I'll do the same thing. So by the end of the process, I'll have probably a stack between 50 to 75 little pieces of paper stapled together, each one of them being a specific scene. Now, I'll take the first scene, I'll put it on my desk, I'll move all the other stuff away, and I'll read that scene again. And what I'm going to do with that scene is I'm going to create the story grid spreadsheet. Let's walk through the very first scene in The Silence of the Lambs. The very first thing that we're going to do is column 1 is scene number. So it's the first scene, we're going to put 1 there. The second column is word count, and the first scene, it's 1,690 words. And in the case of The Silence of the Lambs, each scene is actually around 2,000 words. And that's, somebody asked me what's a recommended length for a scene, I would say between 2,000 and 3,000 words. I think it's sort of potato chip length, in that people, once you read 2,000 words, it doesn't take that long. If it's a great scene, you'll read the next one. If you're writing scenes that are 8,000 words, people will quit in the middle. It's that simple. So the next column is the third column, story event. Now, this is as few words as possible. What you want to sum up is what happened in this scene. So the story event for the first scene in Silence of the Lambs is FBI recruit Clarice Starling gets an interesting job, right? She's recruited to interview Hannibal Lecter. So you don't have to get into the massive details. You can go into as much detail as you'd like on the first round of this. It's fine. But what you'll slowly understand is the better your scenes are, the fewer the number of words you're going to need to describe them. So that's the story event. The fourth column is the value shift. Now, the value shift is a very important thing. In this case, it's a change in movement in the scene. So at the beginning of this scene, Clarice Starling is just another newbie. She's just a recruit of the FBI. So she's not chosen. And by the end of this scene, she's chosen. She's chosen to do a job. So she moves from being ignored to chosen. That's a shift. That's a value shift. When you're ignored, nobody cares. When you're chosen, you're part of the group. So that's the value shift in scene 1. The next column is polarity shift. And the polarity shift is pretty simple. It means, are we moving from a state of positive to negative, or negative to positive, or even negative to double negative? And what I mean by that is in the first scene of Silence of the Lambs, at the beginning, Clarice Starling is just another FBI recruit. So she's sort of one in a crowd. So it's sort of a negative point of view from her world. And because she's chosen for this special errand, she's now moved to the positive. She's now caught the attention of the higher-ups at the FBI. So the polarity shift in the first scene is from a negative to a positive. The next column is the turning point, and this is a critical moment in the scene. Just like a global story has to have a beginning, middle, and end, so does each scene. And what the demarcation point of when the scene changes is what's called the turning point. So before the turning point, things are one way. After the turning point, things are another way. At the beginning of this scene, Clarice Starling goes into the office with Jack Crawford. And he says, "Starling, you're doing great out there. I'm I really think you're going to make a terrific FBI agent. She says, thank you, sir. I've got my eye on you. End of scene. It's not a scene. Nothing changed. Instead, he used the turning point. He had Jack Crawford offer Starling a job, and she chose to interview Lecter. So that's a great scene. It's short, 1,690 words, and it turns very, very succinctly. The reason why we do this over and over again, we got to make sure every scene is turning. If our scenes aren't turning, we're going to find that out when we go to our box that says turning point and we don't have anything to write down. We're going to circle that scene. We're going to take those 3 pages and we're going to say, I'm cutting those. The next column is point of view. And the reason why we want to track point of view is you want to make sure that you're consistently showing the reader one particular point of view, or when you do change point of views, that it's a very, very conscious choice. So for the first scene in Silence of the Lambs, the point of view is Clarice Starling's point of view, and it's from an omniscient point of view, meaning she doesn't see everything that we can. The next column is the period and time. And this is important for tracking continuity. Have you ever been to a movie and you see somebody smoking a cigarette in one scene and they cut and the next thing they have a glass of vodka? That's a continuity problem. And you don't want that to happen in your book. So the next sort of series of columns are all about making sure that the continuity in your storytelling is consistent. So in the first scene of The Silence of the Lambs, the period of time is February 6th, and it's a Thursday morning. The next column is duration, meaning how long is this scene taking place? Is it 2 hours? Are they on a stakeout? Is it a 9-hour stakeout in a car? Usually you want to be able to mix up the durations of your scenes because you want to constantly be shifting and surprising your audience. So in this case, it's about 15 minutes. It takes about a 15-minute meeting. The next column is location, and in this case, it's FBI headquarters in Quantico. The next column is to track on-stage characters. And what on-stage characters means are those characters that are literally in the scene, talking to one another. So in this case, it's Jack Crawford and Clarice Starling. So we have a 2-person scene. And I always track the number of characters too, because again, you want to be mixing it up. You want to, give a tight scene and then follow it up with a larger scene. So in this case, there's 2. I also track the offstage characters to make it consistent so that oh, I did refer to Hannibal Lecter at the very, very beginning of this book, so I don't have to be so intense in introduction later on. So in this case, there are 13 offstage characters that I literally list. And the reason why it's the introduction of a book, so Thomas Harris is trying to get in as much exposition as he can in a very interesting, dramatic way, and he succeeds. You might think all of this stuff is overkill, right? We've got 14 columns, you're filling all this stuff in, 64 scenes, you're almost at the end of the Excel spreadsheet. What's going on? You're crazy, right? This is pointless. You're going to have that feeling, but the truth is, this is what separates the pros from the amateurs. So a lot of people say, why do you obsessively do this stuff? And I'll tell you, one of the other people who does it, and it's a really terrific story, is J.K. Rowling. She mapped the entire Harry Potter, universe on a spreadsheet, and you can go online, you can see it. She spent the time, a lot of time, to make sure that each of her characters were in the right place at the right time. She knew from book 1 to book 7 where everybody was in a specific time and place. This is a woman who worked very, very hard to make sure that her storytelling was consistent and the continuity was there every time. So why are we tracking all this stuff? Why are we tracking the word count, the scene number, the value shift, the polarity shift? What does all this mean? What does it matter? Well, the reason why we're doing it is we want to be able to track from scene to scene whether or not we are making any sort of changes that will surprise the reader. So if we're moving from scene to scene and nothing changes in that a value goes from negative to positive, negative to positive, negative to positive, we're going to understand that the reader is going to get bored with that. They're going to get in a routine. So you constantly want to be turning and changing and surprising your storytelling. When I'm editing a book and I'm talking to a writer, and if I say to them, something about the middle part, not enough colors, I'm not really sure I'm getting where you're going. That is absolutely not helpful whatsoever. What's important is to say, hey, look, in scene 36, when the waitress goes in to get the cup of coffee, it's not working. Then he can immediately go to that scene in his mind. He's the writer. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. And you can have a very quick conversation, and you can nail and destroy a problem in about 10 seconds. So if you have this exhaustive, story grid spreadsheet in front of you as a writer, you can have these meetings with yourself in microseconds. And you can fix things so quickly with so little effort that you're not banging your head against a wall saying, oh, my third act doesn't work. You'll know it doesn't work, and you'll know what to do to fix it. So that's why it's important to take the time and the blue-collar effort to get your spreadsheet as perfect as possible. Now, when you have your spreadsheet, you go back, and you've got your foolscap page too. And you take your spreadsheet and your foolscap page, and now you're ready to create the story grid. Okay, so now we've come to the moment of truth. This is actually the fun part. To begin with, we're going to talk about the global story value of a serial killer thriller, life and death. And then in between death and life is something called unconsciousness. To track the global value, what you want to do is you want to start and go scene by scene through your story and plot it, literally plot it on the graph itself.